Hi subscribers, how are you? And if you're a YouTuber and you've happened along this vlog out of sheer curiosity, hi, I'm Orla Scory Auckland, how are you? I normally do LGBT plus, predominantly trans news and commentary, but I've been doing these check-ins now. This is part 6, and I've been doing them mainly for my subscribers, who seem to be the ones mainly watching them. So that's how it's been for the last 6 episodes, and I've been doing this since the since the lockdown started. This odd one, I've only done part 6, and we've been in lockdown for what, 2 months, 3 months? 2 months, 2 months. So yeah, as entitled in this description, it's about education, or a slant on education. Now, as you may notice from the title, it says confused, because after I did my last check-in, where I think we discussed transport, I can't remember off the top of my head, I think it was transport, we talked a little bit about the rollback and the easing of the lockdown, but it's very confusing to know what exactly you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, what part of the UK you can do it and what you can't do. And really what the clear message the government is trying to put out there, the UK government, which predominantly talks about England, but does try to use the other 3 countries of the Union in it, but they all have their own devolved governments and they're all doing their own thing, and they're easing their lockdowns in different ways. So I can only talk about what goes on in England, really. And here in England, it's very confusing to sort of know what you can and cannot do. I went through a few things in the last vlog, and that still holds true. But yesterday I popped into the Teachers that's not a name of a pub, that's a person, to see them. And we socially distanced in the garden, but from what I've gathered, we weren't really allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do it in your garden. You do it in open spaces, but not in your own garden, apparently. So we inadvertently broke the lockdown rules. But the lockdown rules are so weak. I've got this friend, to go off on a tangent here, who is obsessed with the conspiracy theories around the lockdown. But the way he talks, you would think that we lived in a repressive state where it was authoritarian and they were stripping us of all our rights. Compared to other parts of Europe, the UK's lockdown has been the lamest lockdown you can think of imaginable. The only 2 countries in the world that have had lame lockdowns, which have been more advisory, more with a few fines lumped in if you get blatantly caught doing something wrong. But they've not been a stringent lockdown. In places like Italy and Spain, you've needed things like a letter to say you can go to the shops, a pass, your papers are checked, and all stuff like that. But you don't really, you haven't had that in the UK. It's been very, very weak lockdown compared to what other countries have had. And surprisingly, we have had the highest death rate in Europe so far. The only country in the world that's had a higher death rate than us is America, and you've all seen what their lockdown's like. It's a bit of a joke in some parts of the country. But it's really weird to know what to do and what you can't do and what's open and what's not open. I've got a mask, because I'm assuming you need to wear a mask when you go on public transport and you go into confined spaces, so I've bought a mask for when that happens. But I think when the government announced originally around Corona, they were going for the herd immunity. And then they rolled back from that when the press went nuts and the general public were like, you want to kill my granny. I think they've gone for a semi-herd immunity approach. I think that's because that's all you can explain from the lockdown and the rollback now, where public transport is being more geared up. Although apparently today there was less people using public transport and going into work than there was last week. So some people are obviously working from home when other people have used what the government suggested. You cycle, walk or drive. Don't use public transport. It's just, I think they went for herd immunity. I think that's where they basically went for. Because I feel they didn't believe they could introduce a lockdown that the public would stick to. And most of the general public have stuck to the lockdown, and on all apparent gauges are still adhering to the lockdown to some degree. But I think the government felt they couldn't force the general public in this country into their homes permanently, and I think they still feel that they can't do that. I think they feel that the British public wouldn't put up with it for very long, although the opinion polls say we will, and say we support a lockdown and wish the government would be more stricter. But it's just the theory I have, that they have gone for the herd immunity. It's an unofficial policy. They've gone for sort of herd immunity and lockdown. So they take the pressure off the NHS. They open the Nightingale hospitals just in case. And because all that working around the sides of a semi-lockdown happened, they were able to cushion the blow. But it still meant loads of people died. I think the counts, it's near 35,000. I think it's just under 35,000 deaths in the UK since March, I think since March. In all settings, I believe. Although that figure might be wrong. Some estimates are saying that figure's wrong and it's much higher than that, and our death rate is around 40 to 50,000. But what I wanted to talk about, it's just my rant, it's just the conspiracy theory stuff does my head in, and I think people who feel it's 5G and it's an authoritarian government aren't really paying much attention to how politics works in this country. They have a fantasy idea of politics in this country, and that clouds their judgment, and they don't really have a clear sight into it. I'm not saying I'm enlightened in any way, I just think I have a more sensible, common approach to issues like that. It's like 5G. I used to do a podcast, the Fresh Brew podcast, where we used to talk about conspiracy theories in a section of it, and I would talk about ones that have been proven correct, conspiracy theories that then were proved right, and we'd also look at the off the wall ones. And 5G, the new one that's going on at the moment, that's what happens when new technology comes about. I mean, if you remember back when smartphones and mobile phones first came around, everybody thought they could give you cancer. You don't hear about that much anymore. So it's just a communal garden conspiracy that forms up around new technology. I haven't really looked into all the 5G, but I don't think it's going to kill us all. I think that's just nuts. And the conspiracy theorists all around the coronavirus tend to be anti-vaxxers and people who believe they live in an authoritarian state. And they should be largely ignored because they're stupid. So I think if anything, I think the government quietly went for herd immunity. I think they felt they couldn't get on top of the disease, the virus, until they found a vaccine, and so the best thing they could think of doing was going for herd immunity. I don't think they purposely went around thinking let's kill off the weak and the vulnerable. I just think they felt that they could do a semi-lockdown and protect certain parts of the population, and then in other parts of the population let the disease run its course. It'd be interesting to see if this antibody test comes up and it does show you that a lot of people in this country have had it. I think I saw an opinion, a survey that showed that it's believed upwards of 60 to 80% of the population in the UK may have it or have had it at some point. How true that statistic is, I don't know. It's just all numbers crunching. So what I was going to talk about was education. The teacher is a secondary school teacher, and I have a member of my close family who is a primary school teacher, and I can talk from the primary school angle. They're aiming to have back a few years, but not all years. It's planning to come into effect around the beginning of June. They can't have all years, and they're having to space a couple of years out between the number of classrooms they have, because they have 30 in a class, and I think the government's proposal is to have 15 in a class. So they will maximise their space by doing that, so they can't have all their kids back. The teacher, who's a secondary school teacher, she doesn't really know what's going on and hasn't got much of a clue, and neither does much of her school. I think on the whole, these schools, individual schools, have been doing their own thing and getting minimal advice from central government or the local councils. The government plans to take certain years back around the beginning of June, as I say, but councils like Liverpool and Hartlepool have both said their kids aren't going back. That's what they said towards the end of last week, over the weekend. They said their kids aren't going back. Other schools are preparing to do it. How they'll do it, as I can tell from my close family member, they're not entirely sure how it will all work. They're kind of making it up, as I say, as they're going along. They're going to do the best they can, but it's going to be difficult. So the schools are going back, but not all years. And some primary schools can't have reception year going back because they don't, as I say, they don't have the space. And so the plan that the government had, that reception year and possibly year 10 and 12 go back, the sixth formers and year 10s, to start on their GCSEs, because the year 10s will be year 11s next year and will have their exams. They want them to go back, but it's all down to space and if they can do it. And I think as well, from my close family member, they've said they've sent letters out to parents and basically letting the parents make their own mind up if they feel safe to let their kids go back or stay at home and teach from home. But the schools are very much making it up as they go along. And there hasn't been much provision put in for distance learning in the schools by central government or local government. So as I said, they've been making it up as they go along. Each individual school does its own thing. They use different sorts of software, different platforms, different social media strategies. They send out emails. In some secondary school, they get emails back. They do work long distance. The schools are still seeing key workers, and some teachers are going in rotation to look after the key worker kids. But they're just making it up as they go along because they've got no real solid guidance from central government or local councils. I don't know how they'll do it. From what I can tell from my close family member who I spoke to today, it's a bit hectic and they're concerned, they're worried, but they're going to do the best they can, and that's all you can expect. So that's the school. So that's check-in part 6. I hope you're well. I hope you're looking after yourselves. I hope you're keeping safe. If you've gone back to work, I hope you're all right and everything's going okay. If you're still at home, I hope you're getting something out of these vlogs. I'm going to try and do a news and commentary one soon. I've got to go through Pink News. I haven't read it today. So I'm going to go through it and see if there's a gender critical story in there about ex-gender critical members. I might see if that's interesting and see if I can do something for you. But I don't know. I'm going to try and do something for you. So stay safe, look after yourselves. If you've gone back to work, stay safe at work. Look after yourselves, and I will see you next time, YouTubers and subscribers. Goodbye.